You here have heard the term GMOs before? Okay. I'm sure most people in the US have heard the term before, as it's becoming a pretty popular phenomenon. But I'm going to ask, how many of you actually know what a GMO is or what it means? So a couple of people, yeah. Alright, well, as a current pre-med student and as a person that works in an all-organic establishment, I thought it would be of my best interest to learn more about GMOs and share what I've learned with you guys today. Tonight I aim to briefly inform you all of what a GMO is, their history, and their uses in society. To begin, I think it would be best if I gave you guys a clear and concise definition of what GMOs are. As defined by the World Health Organization, GMOs, which stand for genetically modified organisms, are organisms in which the genetic material, DNA, has been altered in a way that does not occur naturally. This category of organisms can include microorganisms, plants, animals, and insects. The process of genetic engineering involves the identification of a desirable trait, a gene, and a gene is basically just a short sequence of DNA. And then you basically have to isolate, reproduce, and artificially insert that desirable trait in a different species. And the goal of genetic modification is to express the new gene in a different species, so cross-species DNA mixing. Now, of course, we have biological barriers to prevent DNA from mixing. It's why we can't just put organs from different animals in our cells or something. So basically to go around this, scientists have formulated a couple different methods of artificially inserting that DNA. A couple methods are attaching the gene to a virus, firing the gene with a gene gun, and physically inserting the gene with a fine syringe. And you can also use electric pulses to transfer the gene between organisms. I guess to make things more clear, I'm going to give you guys an example of genetic modification in action. So Atlantic salmon, which takes up to 3 years to mature, it was a really popular thing. Salmon is eaten by people all around the world. But because its demand was so high, there wasn't enough supply. So the scientists thought of a way to shorten this maturation period. One way they did it is they found 2 different species of fish that has a growth-promoting gene. And they thought that if they take those 2 genes and put them in the Atlantic salmon, then they could shorten the cycle. They tried this, and Atlantic salmon did end up growing faster. And according to Aqua Bounty, the creators of genetically modified salmon, the modification led to their salmon to grow to market size in half the time of conventional salmon. So if you've heard someone say farm-grown fish or farm salmon, that's what they mean. It's the salmon grows to a much larger size at a much faster rate because of the genetic modification. Now that we have a basic understanding of what GMOs are, I'd like to tell you a little bit about how they came to be. So the idea of genetically modifying or artificially promoting desirable genes has always been around, and it can even be dated back to around 12,000 BC with the domestication of dogs. Before genetic engineering existed, farmers would selectively breed animals and plants for desirable genes. So basically, they just pick the ones with the best genes, keep breeding those, and eventually you would have better plants and animals. So the idea of modification has always been there. We just hadn't had the means to actually do it. The first successful genetic engineering experiment was by Herbert Boyer and Stanley Cohen in 1973. They later also conducted the first cross-kingdom genetic modification, which was they took some genes from a toad and inserted them into bacterial cells, and that was the first successful cross-species DNA, I guess, mixing. Another breakthrough was also in 1973. It was the creation of the first genetically modified animal, which was a mouse, it was done by Rudolf Janisch. Janisch was able to insert foreign DNA into a mouse's embryo, and it led to a genetically modified mouse that was resistant to certain viruses. This method was later improved upon in 1981 by Frank Ruddle, and this allowed for the gene to be passed on to offspring. Now, the first genetically modified plant came by in 1983 in an effort to create a tobacco that had antibiotic resistance, and so scientists did that, and that was the first plant that was created using genetic modification. Although the history is still really recent, it's a field that's becoming consistently expanding, but not without a lot of controversy. With this basic understanding of GMOs, I'm sure their use is starting to become pretty clear. In modern societies, GMOs are now used in pharmaceuticals, gene therapy, and agriculture. Just in plants, scientists have been able to genetically modify plants for aesthetic reasons, such as the creation of the blue rose, and they've been able to use them in biopharmaceuticals. In terms of crops, scientists have been able to create plant strains that are resistant to herbicides, viruses, and harsh environmental conditions. This has allowed farmers to grow crops out of season and in conditions that would otherwise be impossible normally. According to the USDA, genetically modified corn currently accounts for over 85% of all the corn in the U.S. And we're the biggest exporter of corn, so it's a huge deal for us. And from just 2000 to about 2013, the percents have been astronomical in increase of GMO products. Microorganisms such as bacteria have a wide variety of uses also. They're used in medicine and in food processing mainly. A well-known protein, insulin, used to treat diabetes, is a result of genetic modification of bacteria. So that's how they produce the insulin that's used today. In animals, GMOs are mainly used for research, consumer products, pharmaceuticals, enhancement of food production, and modification of animal resistance. Although not a main use of GMOs, hypoallergenic pets are a result of genetic modification. As can be seen, there are a plethora of uses for GMOs in modern society. With the use of GMOs being such a widespread phenomenon in the U.S., it's important for us to be aware of what it is and the situation. So I hope I've been able to teach you a little bit about what a GMO is, their history, and their uses in society, so that next time you hear the word being thrown around, you know what they mean.